Hey everybody, welcome back to Dental Unfiltered. I'm Matt Brown, and we're here with my normal co-host, Dr. Andrew Vallo. We have a really special guest today, Paul Etchison from Dental Practice Heroes. Paul's pretty popular in the marketplace. You'll see him all over social media, at most of the dental events, and it's really exciting to have him. Today we want to talk about a subject about how little he works as far as clinical days. But first I want to give Paul a chance to kind of introduce himself and tell the audience a little about who he is and kind of his story. So Paul, why don't you take it from there?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks for having me on, guys. Excited to be here. Just for the listeners, if you haven't heard of me, my whole story is I did a startup about 12 years ago, and we grew it really big, really fast. And as we continue to grow it, I put more systems in and put in a leadership team, and I eventually pulled myself out clinically almost entirely to the point like over the past 10 12 years, I've went through the process of cutting my clinical days as I was needed more for management and leadership in the practice. But I also started focusing on the procedures I only wanted to do, which at one time was the first step in that was just cutting out fillings, because that's the easy one. I don't want to do a class 2 ever again. And then cutting out crowns and not doing single crowns and only doing bigger cases. And then I was just doing veneers and implants and ortho. And now I'm just doing ortho, which is probably 85% band and bracket, and then maybe 15% Invisalign. So most of it's band and bracket. And that's what I like, so I still enjoy that. But I got my practice to a level where it runs more or less without me. And this is what I teach and what I try to show people is that it's so possible. It just takes a little intentionality on the front end and just working with your team.
Well, Paul, we're really glad to have you here today. I think back to God, it was probably 6 or 7 years ago. I was driving an hour and 20 minutes each way, commuting to rural Ohio, working in public health, and I used to hear Paul's voice a lot. You had one of my favorite podcasts out there, so I listened to a lot of the episodes over the years, and honestly, man, I got a lot of the wisdom from you as far as how I've built my dental group and our systems and our bonus systems and things like that. So, thank you for all the contributions that you've made to the dental community. And I'm excited to dive in a little more about your story here. So you said you had opened your startup about 12 years ago. So this was your first practice that you had ever owned, correct?
Yeah, I started building it about 2 years out of dental school. So I associated, and then I started looking for the place. We got in there in 2012.
Awesome. So how did that growth trajectory look? Like when did you start adding associates? Did you build out bigger, or have you been the same size the whole time? How many docs are in there now? How did you start cutting yourself down from, however many days a week it was? I just love to hear more about that trajectory.
Yeah. When I opened up the practice, I had no idea I didn't know what I didn't know. I was going into it and just saying, hey, I'm going to work at my new practice maybe 2-3 days a week. I'm going to keep my associateship. I don't know how busy we're going to be. I don't know if we're going to be profitable. I don't know how long it's going to take. There's so many unknowns. And we went in it with the idea that, hey, let's just focus on every little thing. Let's focus on every little detail, and let's just see how it goes. And it's just like anything. You get into it, you start figuring out what works. As long as you're you're looking back and you're saying, what didn't work? What can we learn from it? And we just continue to grow. So I would say when we opened up, we were seeing roughly 70, 80 new patients a month. And that grew to the point where I was still doing 4 days a week. And I needed to do something because I couldn't see all the people. And we continued to have that new patient flow. And then we were running out of places to put new patients. So we needed more hygienists. And then as we got more hygienists, we had nowhere. I couldn't check all these hygienists. So it got to the point where I needed an associate. But looking back on it, I needed the associate way sooner. I just didn't know. And I was scared of it too. Just like anybody. You're bringing somebody else into your practice. You don't know how they're going to treat your patients. You hear people that say, I had an associate, didn't work. And it was just like a scary thing. And then it got to the point where I got so burnt out because it was like I was always needed. It's like, I need you. My team needs me. This patient needs me. It's a weekend. They need me. I don't have anywhere to put them. Come in early. Okay, we don't have anywhere to put them there. You're already coming in early. We'll stay in late. So we added the associate, and that's when I went from 4 to 3 days a week. And that was an awesome time in my life because initially it was like 4-day weekend, every single weekend, and you just can't believe how much time you have. But I eventually started realizing that, hey, if I focus on these systems, if I get in here on that day off, like I do 3 clinical days and I focus and I say, hey man, like look at some numbers. Let's look at like what's going well. Let's talk to the team. The practice just started taking off. And then we started seeing way more new patients. And then I had the opportunity next door to me to expand into space. So I was a 5-op practice. I didn't say that. So I had the opportunity to expand in the space next to us and go to 11 operatories. And when we did that, we brought on another associate. I cut another clinical day. And then we eventually brought on another associate. So 3 full-time associates. And then we brought on some specialists. We've got a periodontist, neurosurgeon, and a endodontist. We had an endodontist. We just recently lost our endodontist, but we had one. And now over the course of just that, it was just, there was always like, I'm looking in retrospect and I'm saying, what would I have done different? Because I don't pretend to act like I had all the answers, because a lot of the stuff I know, I learned it. And I learned that I should have got to the associate faster. I also learned I should have pulled myself out clinically sooner, more so sooner, because I dealt with a lot of stress and a lot of overwhelm. And it was because of 2 things. One, I had all these things management wise, training wise, I wanted to do with my team and things I want to take care of. And I couldn't get to them because I was seeing patients. And 2, I hadn't really effectively multiplied myself into my leadership team to insulate me against that day-to-day stuff, which eventually led me to partnering up with a DSO that was over 3 years, almost 4 years now. And I'm out of contract with them, but I'm still working at my practice as a minority owner. And what I found in that process these past 3-4 years is that I've really like taken the training wheels off of my leadership team, and they run everything. And it's beautiful and it's glorious. And I don't get bothered. And I know there's things going on at the practice. And if I want to be pissed off, I can ask my team about them, and I can ask my leads, hey, what's going on? Give me some stuff to like get worried about and get pissed off. But I don't ask them, and they don't tell me because they take care of it. So I'm out of contract with the DSO that I signed up with, and I'm staying at the practice just out of fulfillment. I like it. I like being part of the team, and I've created it to be almost more or less passive, where I insert myself in just 3 days a month and I do my ortho, and if I want to be there, I go. Most of the time I don't, so, but I like being part of it. So
I love that, Paul. I think there's a lot of great things to unpack from what you just said there. I think the most important thing that I want to highlight for our listeners is, you made a statement, actually, you said it twice, that you should have hired an associate sooner. I think many dentists, think this way, where they are waiting for the exact right moment. I see posts in the dental Facebook groups all the time. How do I know when I'm ready for an associate? Or here's my exact situation. Do you think I could, hire an associate now? Part of the reason why my group has grown so fast is because I hire for the office I want tomorrow, today. So like I have that mentality of, even if I don't really need that other hygienist, I'm going to hire them. We're going to figure it out. We'll ramp up marketing. Maybe there'll be some hygiene holes here and there. But if you do that, you're going to catalyze your growth and you're going to grow so much faster. I think the other side of that equation, as you mentioned, about realizing that you need to spend some time working on the business instead of in the business. We're in a very similar position now, where I'm clinical 1 day a week. So I see patients on Tuesdays, mostly doing Invisalign, a little bit of smile makeover stuff. But when I tell people this, a lot of times they think that means I'm playing a lot of golf, or I'm just like, man, you work 1 day a week. That sounds amazing. And it does sound amazing. I have to tell you, it's not quite as amazing as it sounds, because the other days of the week, and even on the weekend, most of the time, I'm doing, roles of the CEO, the business owner, that type of a thing. And I think a lot of dentists fail to realize that too. They're thinking like, hey, I'd love to step back from working in my practice, but if you want to add associates and you want to grow and you want to expand into more operatories, or you want to get a second practice, like you need to spend that time working on your business as well. So like my golf clubs haven't left my garage in a year. They've got cobwebs on them. And I'm getting ready for a golf trip with some buddies next week. So it's just like, there are sacrifices that you have to make in order to grow. And I think you kind of made those sacrifices once you realized how beneficial they could be for your practice. That allowed you to grow to the point where you became attractive to a DSO and you were able to make this deal which now probably has made your life a little bit easier, I would imagine. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Much easier. And same thing, like my friends, they think I don't work at all. And my family thinks the same thing. They're like, what do you complain? You don't even work. And it's like, you know what? I am. I'm doing it. And it's all the time. And sometimes I have to remind my wife, can you stop working? And I have to tell her, I'm like, yeah, you know what? Like you see me working, but I actually enjoy this. Like this is more like, could be a hobby for me. Like this is, so, I mean, I like working with stuff. I like doing my podcast. I like doing the coaching. That's what I'm really kind of my heart's in right now. But like you said about the associate thing, I think with more intentionality, I mean, what I see in most practices is that they have the hygiene schedule and it's just, let's just put patients where they fit. And what that eventually does is that prioritizes recall over new patients. And you need new patients to grow. And you're saying, well, I'm not prioritizing recall. I'm just saying whatever fits. Well, I'm like, when does a new patient get scheduled? Usually 2 to 3 weeks out, maybe. That recall appointments get scheduled 6 months ahead of time. So that will always take priority unless you get in that schedule and you hold space for those new patients. So
true.
yeah, when I tell people you've got to hold spaces for those new patients, and if you got 2 full-time hygienists and you can hold roughly 6 new patient slots per hygienist per day, and some people might say, whoa, I can't fill that. Well, okay, but you can. You got to figure out how to do it. But when you hold that space and you reappoint, when you get to that 3rd recall cycle, you don't have anywhere to put your recall. And you're like, well, okay, well, I have one or two choices. One, I get rid of some of my new patient flow and I start seeing my recall, which is steps backwards, or you expand with another hygienist. And by that 4th recall cycle, you've got another 3rd full-time hygienist that should be fully busy. And even if she wasn't, or he or she wasn't, I mean, they have to see a half a schedule to break even, is what I always say for hygiene. So if they can show up there and we consistently see that in a practice, the doctor is going to do maybe, 4 or 5x of what the hygienist does, just statistically. If that hygienist can break even, the doctor is going to get some work out of that. So it's like you mentioned, Andrew, you grow into your team, but you can't grow into your team unless you solve the new patient problem. Without the new patient problem solved, you can't grow. So there's no team to grow in because you're flatlined at a certain point. When you get to the point where maybe 12 to 1,300 active patients, that's all 2 full-time or hygienists can see in a year, typically. So it's people say, when is the right time for associate? You've got to plan it ahead a year and a half of time, and you got to say, this is where I'm going, and then you got to put these systems in place. But man, it's not that scientific, and it's really not that hard to do. You just got to do it.
Would you find that like most dentists are reactive and not proactive? That like you're talking about planning out ahead, and you're talking about like clearing the runway for it and analyzing the problem and saying that at this point in time this becomes a problem. And you find like dentists are so in the operatory, so tunnel visioned, and they're so locked in that op. I find that dentists they hire a manager with one of 2 spirits. One spirit is the manager to be an extension of me to activate the business strategy I want. Another is to keep them from the business strategy. And then that dentist ends up being very reactive to these giant problems, and it's almost snowballed and too late. Do you find that's the case? Like the mentality is very reactive instead of proactive?
All the time. I think there's no intentionality. And I think it comes from one of 2 things, is that if we do a startup, we don't need to put new patient blocks in for the first 6 months. We don't need to block it because like everybody's a new patient.
Yeah.
So it's like, and this is how we figured this out, is that's how we did it. And then we got like maybe like 2 years in or something. And the hygienists are like, we're so busy. And I'm sitting in my office. I'm like, I have nothing to do. I've seen 12 new patients this month. And that's a crappy problem to have because you can't fix it for 6 months. Like when you go out in the schedule and you put those blocks in, you got to wait 6 months to get there. So I remember that 6 months. So that's how we figured that out. But, people or they're going to buy into a practice, and that's the way they've always done it. They've never held priority for new patients. So they say, this is just how you do it. I mean, this person's been doing it for 20 years. Why would I change what they're doing? It worked for them. They're retiring. They're doing well. So we just don't know what's possible. And I think the discourse that we see on the internet is sometimes not all that favorable for people to come out and say, I mean, I see you on Facebook groups, Andrew, and you're saying like, hey, look at what we're doing. And sometimes I would love to share. And sometimes I have shared, and people troll you. And they say, oh, humble brag, look at this guy showing off. And it's just like, you know what? I just think there's so much opportunity for success, and I love hanging around with successful dentists, and I think anyone can do it. And I think anyone listening to this is a different type of dentist. If you go to an event that is put together by a podcast, it is a different type of dentist than the CE that shows up at the local ADA or AGD. It's just a different type of business minded dentist. So I think we know something that everyone else doesn't know, or we just care more. But it all comes down to that intentionality and, like you said, the reactivity.
I think guys like you get into the details and find where you want to care, and you really start to develop the ability to care more about all the details. I think that's what really happens.
I think it's mindset too, man. I think, so like I'm part of the DSI mastermind group with Mark Costas and stuff. And I feel like the mindset when you get into these groups is different than the general mindset in the dental Facebook groups. It's the abundance versus scarcity. It's everyone knows that like we can achieve more if we do this, and everyone's motivated and people aren't scared to spend money on things and try new things. I think, even from the get-go, I was always very growth oriented, but I also like didn't have any systems, or I didn't have a roadmap to how I did it. So like when I opened my first startup, the goal was always to get new patients in. We hired a hygienist from day one. That's always my biggest advice I give to startups, because so many of the quote unquote experts out there are saying you can't afford a hygienist from day one. And I say you can't afford not to have a hygienist from day one. You're just talking about like, what's the ROI from a hygiene appointment versus a doctor appointment? If you're doing all your own hygiene, you have no time to do the high ticket dollar procedures. So that's a hill that I will die on, is you need to hire a hygienist from day one. But as far as like when to hire the next hygienist, like I just kind of did it based on feel. Like, you know what, I think, we're growing. I think we could add another one. I don't know if we have enough patients, we'll make it work. Now, when I do a new startup, I pre-block out the schedule so that 6 months ahead, we make blocks for a new hygienist. So basically, from day one, we run 2 columns of hygiene with one hygienist. We do assisted hygiene, hour and a half new patient appointments. Assistant does all the beginning. Hygienist tries to get the same day cleaning done, unless they need SRP, which sometimes she still ends up doing that same day. And then 6 months from there, we know she's going to have a recall system. So we had already pre-blocked out for the next hygienist. And then 6 months from there, we're pre-blocked out for the next hygienist. So that way, 12 months into a new startup, we now have 3 full-time hygienists there. So I think intentionality goes a long way and can really help you grow much faster if you actually think about these things and strategize and have a plan for exactly when you're ready to add your next team member, add your next associate, add your next hygienist. As Paul pointed out, like with the way hygiene recall works, once you realize you made a mistake, you might have to wait 6 months before you can really fix it. Now, that said, I did realize at one point that we ran into an issue where we didn't have enough space for the new patients. So we started bringing new patients in on the doctor side. So in my mind, it is just so important that you get new patients are the lifeblood of any practice, but especially a growing practice. So if your hygiene is so full and you have no room to add another hygienist, you need to figure out other creative ways to get more new patients in the door. So that's an option. You can start bringing in new patients on the doctor side instead of through hygiene. But
well, what's interesting, and this is what I tell everybody, so we're just talking about blocking out and hygiene, but you can also do it on the doctor side as well. It's hold time for bigger procedures. But once you build that schedule template, there's your playbook. Everything's there. If you're filling all your new patient blocks and you're still having people calling, we're like, hey, we can't get you in 2 months. Guess what? You need more new patient blocks. And if you can't fit more new patient blocks, you need more hygienists. And if you got too many hygienists now that doctors can check, it's for time for an associate. But, and same thing with like, we hold time for SRPs. We typically do a 3-to-1 new patients to SRPs. And that's what works in our office. But same thing, if you've got a bunch of SRP blocks that aren't filling, you need to up your perio program, you up your diagnosis, up your case acceptance, or you need to take some blocks away. I would prefer the former is upping, filling them. So it's like, I think there's so much that can be done if we open up our schedules and we hold time for the things that belong there. And it's math, it is math. But I agree with you, Andrew. I do the same thing. It's like, how does it feel? You make decisions based on feel. But as I've made all my decisions based on feel, when I went back and actually wrote it out and saw what happened, it's all math. Like what I'm telling you with 6 new patients per hygienist for 4 days a week, you're going to get the capacity right around, it's like 1,170 something patients. And it just works out. And it's like, oh, well, where's that? That's where that number came from. It all works out math wise, but it doesn't need to be that complicated because it's just holding space.
Part of it, is in the military we have a saying like aim small, miss small. Like it's control. Really, when you block the calendar out and build that structure, you're really creating targets that now you have to fill. You're putting a
Right.
gun to your head, and you're like, all right, well, I blocked this out, and if I'm true to my strategy, I have to fill it. If you don't block it out, you never really create the goal or the target, and it becomes like random chaos. And then that's hard to
Mhm.
control and regulate and structure for growth. So really the calendar with the blocks that we were talking about is actually creating the actual mental target of I got to fill that time.
Yeah. It reminds me of like when we started blocking on the doctor side, it was like, oh my gosh, like I'm doing 2-3 crowns a day every single day because I'm holding the space. And then, the greedy dentist in me says, ooh, man, 3 crowns a day. Why don't I put 5 crowns a day in? And guess what happened? I couldn't fill 5, So it was like, now I need to either diagnose more,
Yep.
or I need to get better case acceptance, or I need to see more patients, or I need to realize, hey, man, you don't have the patient flow to do 5 crowns every single day of the week. And that's eventually where we went to. We cut it down to about 3 blocks every day. But it's like, but yeah, you start with those targets and you're like, hey, am I filling them? Am I hitting them? No. Okay, why not? What can we do? Are you hitting them? Cool. Should we be hitting more of them? Let's put more big targets up there. Can we hit them? If not, back up. It's like everything practice management stems from setting up those targets. And I love that you said targets. I think that's an awesome way to think about it, is setting up the targets. And if you can't hit them, or if you can, you know what to do next.
What gives you a chance to adjust your fire too, based on where you hit.
Yeah, exactly.
You can,
Yeah,
you can
totally.
see where you landed. Like you didn't land on 5 crowns. Your patient flows for
Oh, man.
3, right? And maybe you put something
I
else
love
in
this
those clubs.
analogy.
And you've got to actually look
Yeah.
at your numbers. You've got to actually take the time to sit down and analyze what's going on. Because I mean, it's one thing to set everything up, but if you don't take the time to look back and figure out what's working or what's not working, it's tough to adjust to. Again, you're just making decisions on feeling rather than actually on analysis or numbers or anything like that. So obviously it's really important that we have a playbook as far as where we want to put new patients, but like one of the biggest problems for a lot of dentists is just not driving enough new patient flow. So obviously you guys didn't have that problem, and that's why you grew so fast. What do you think were some of the main either strategies that you used to drive new patient flow to your practice, or what were some of the main reasons that you had so many new patients coming to your practice? Like what worked for you guys well?
Yeah, and that's like we're coming back to the target thing. You put them out there, and now you've got to solve that problem. So when I look at new patient flow, there's 3 hurdles we got to get through. The first of which being is that somebody has to be looking for a new dentist, and they have to find us. This day and age, that's going to be the internet. So that's me paying somebody to do my SEO. That's paying somebody to do my pay-per-click campaigns like on Google so that I get seen. I've got to get seen. That's the first step. Second step is that they have to click on my website. So what on that Google page, what is going to make them click on my website if they see it? And for me, that's going to be my reviews. So am I generating more reviews than my competitors so that they're like, okay, and this is what it looks like in my town of New Lenox, Illinois. We've got 1,700 plus reviews. I think the closest person to us might have like 350 and then 100. And then there's like people that obviously there's a ton of dentists that just don't even give a crap about it.
Yeah.
Cool. Good for them. And so they click on us. And now we've got an inviting website, an inviting practice that looks nice and is photographed nice and has everybody is wearing the same color scrubs. I mean, that's just like one of my like deep pet peeves is like if I walk into a practice and everybody has different color scrubs, that just drives me crazy.
Or like some wear scrubs and some don't wear scrubs
Yeah.
some days. Drives me nuts.
Yeah, and some people are like patterns, and some people are, hey, I like Mickey Mouse. No, come on, pick a color and stick with it, guys. And so, but we have a attractive website. It's inviting. We make a video. It shows you high-fiving a kid, and it's like in slow motion, and everyone's, yeah, that looks really good. And so now you've created this online presence that has taken this prospective new patient another step in the process. Now, as far as I'm concerned, if you are a prospective new patient and you see my reviews next to everyone else, you're going to click on that. If you see my website, you're not going to call anybody else. There is no reason for you to call anyone else. We're open more than everybody else around us anyway. So then it's just a matter of having somebody with the basic level of phone training and enough people to answer the phone just to get somebody on the schedule. And is for most in-network doctors, that's not very difficult. We just went out of network with Delta. Doing an out-of-network new patient, That's a little bit more of a challenge phone skill wise.
Yeah.
But for the most part, it's, hey, do you take my insurance? Yeah, we're a network. Cool. When can I get in? That's all it needs. So you got to look at that. But then but people are trying to like, okay, well, do I need to get on the community more? Do I need to, should I do this mailer? Should I do all this stuff? And it's just like, you've just got to start with the stuff that's in your control. And you notice like the 3 hurdles I went through, the one that had anything to do with a human was the last one, the phone. Everything else is pre-prepared, pre-planned, and pre-set up. So I would find it hard to believe that if you went through those first 2 steps, if you went through all 3 steps, that you could not see an increase in new patients. And also another one thing that was big on us is that we always tried to, we made a great patient experience. That's important too. We were very staged and very, I guess, scripted, but I don't want to say scripted, but we made sure we did certain things. And we always asked the new patient when they checked out, hey, can we book the rest of your family? And they might be like, oh, no, I'll have them call. Oh, why don't we schedule for them? Okay. And if you can get 20 patients in that will each give you 1 more patient for the next month, and you can now you got 40 next month. I mean, it's just like, so it's just getting that intentionality of solving that new patient problem and looking at all the different ways that you can do it. And honestly, there's just not that many of them, man. And I think we just sometimes as doctors, we got to sit in our waiting room and say, is this the type of place I would like to come to? Yes. And maybe you don't like the nice looking stuff and that doesn't do anything for you. And maybe you think that's shallow and vain. I don't know. But I'm telling you, it works. And I've seen it work so many times for so many people. Even I had a client once that had a nice looking practice and he sent me pictures. I'm like, dude, put these on your website, get some pictures. And he did it and redid his whole website. New patient flew, like it blew up. And he's like, it's crazy. And he's like, it's a different type of patient I'm getting now. So it's like, you got to we have to draw them in. We got to put the right bait on the hook.
I find that we talk to practices every day here at our company. And, I find there's like 3 fundamentals that are really neglected for social media presence, digital footprint. I find a lot of practices they like get their website like 4 years ago and they say, oh, I got my website and it's done. They check it off a box. They don't think that's like a thing that needs to ongoingly get improved and maintained or some attention needs to go into it. That is like the outward view of the world for you, right? And the second is SEO. For some never happens. And the third is reviews. Like the 3 things that matter when a consumer looks at reviews is quality, the amount of stars, quantity, the amount of reviews, and then frequency. How frequent have the reviews been? Do you have 400 reviews from 3 years ago? Doesn't work. And I think that exactly talking about the 3 fundamentals, I think really they're minimal. Like go buy a $4,000 website, go get a $600 a month SEO guy, and then create a process up front to ask for reviews and keep the quality, quantity, and frequency of reviews up. That's minimal investment that does yield. And most, I would say, you guys may think I'm wrong, I think 8 or 9 out of 10 practices don't put any attention to all 3.
Oh yeah, I think absolutely. I totally agree with you. They're not even focusing on it. When we started getting in it, this is 2012, reviews were like just becoming important. And I'm like, let's get these things. And there was no automated text back then. You had to get people. So I was going to like weddings. Like I would go to my wife, Italian family, everyone, someone getting married like every month. I would just go and like, hey, you got Gmail? They said, yeah. And I'm like, let me see your phone. Can you care if I leave my practice review? That's how I got like my first 50 reviews. It was just like, I just did it. And then I just texted people and I said, hey, do it. It's a lot easier now because I mean, they've made it so much easier to find and so much easier to get to, but yeah, easy stuff to do for anyone who wants to put some effort. But here's what the dentists will do. They will put effort in so many other places and get frustrated when the results will be yielded so much better if they put them in the right place.
This is all great, Paul. I want to touch on something that you said a little bit earlier, though, that I think is like a cheat code for dentists out there. If you're not already doing it, is Paul had mentioned how at the end of the appointment, they ask every single patient, does anyone else in your family need to schedule an appointment? Do you need to schedule an appointment for anyone else? That's huge. And we've got our route slip that I customize. There's certain things that our team members have to check off on our route slip. And one of those things is the question, does anyone else in your family need to schedule an appointment? Because just as you mentioned, you can very easily add 4 more appointments as that patient's leaving. And that's huge. It takes 2 seconds. And honestly, for the patient, they're like, oh, that's one less thing I got to worry about. So it's like,
yeah,
it helps your patient out. It's huge for your practice. I mean, that is the fastest way to grow quickly, is to bring in, more families that have 4 or 5 family members in them. And it costs you nothing to do it. So again, this is where the systems come into play, because when we first opened, we didn't do that. I kind of had, maybe certain things I wanted team members to do, but we did not have a specific end of appointment route slip with check boxes of certain steps that our team members had to go through. And now that we do that, things are actually happening like they're supposed to happen every single time.
Well, you're designating a way for things to be done.
Yeah.
And if you don't designate how to do it, you can't expect anyone to do it. And the thing with asking to schedule new patients, I mean, I hope other people can relate to this, but I have had things on my to-do list that I've put off and procrastinated for weeks, sometimes 6-7 weeks. And then I made the phone call, and it was like a 3-minute thing. It only took 3 minutes, and it had that person taking care of it when I saw them. That's what I'm saying. If they're, yeah, I'm going to call, I'll call and I'll set up an appointment. They just don't, man. Everybody's busy. Everybody's got life, and it's so easy just to forget about it. And nobody wants to pick up a phone anymore. So
you're right. It's the same thing with reappointment. That's another question. Does this patient have their next hygiene appointment scheduled? Because you're right. Patients are quick to be like, oh, I don't know what my calendar is going to look like in 6 months, or I'll call you guys. And they probably will eventually call, but I mean, they might go a whole year before they schedule their next appointment. So again, our teams are trained to say, hey, I totally get it. I have no idea what my schedule is going to look like 6 months from now. However, I do know our schedule here at the office gets really busy. And if we wait to schedule your appointment, only the least desirable times are going to be available. I would rather schedule you now so you can pick what time will probably work best for you. And if you need to change, if you realize you need to change it, you can always change it later. We only ask for 48 hours notice, that type of a thing. So we've got again, scripted response whenever patients object to rescheduling. And I'll tell you what, it might not work 100% of the time, but it is going to work 95% of the time. And that's how we're able to get those reappointment rates in the 90%, which everyone should be shooting. I mean, that is one of the biggest determining factors of how successful your practice is going to be, is what percentage of your hygiene appointment, or what percentage of your hygiene patients are pre-appointing their next hygiene appointment. That's huge.
And we ran into that at our office. We weren't really following that number. We weren't following that metric. When we opened up, it was, hey, are you the type of person that wants to make your appointment 6 months ahead of time? Or do you want to just, we'll send you a text and a recall card. This is how we originally did it, because we mailed the card.
You're showing your age, though, Paul.
I know. I feel like I was right. I don't feel like it's as ancient as it sounds, because it was it transitioned right when we opened. It was like, oh, let's move to texting. Let's move to this. But, it's so we will let people decide if they want to do it or not. And what I realized is that we were seeing 80 plus new patients a month, but we didn't get to capacity until year maybe 3. Knowing what I know now, we should have been at capacity at year 1.
Right.
We should have hit it right away. But I'm like, well, this doesn't make sense. And then I started looking at attrition numbers and people that left and didn't come back, and people fell off our recall cycle. And what a bunch of missed opportunity there. So it's just it's things, like I said, I learned everything the hard way, sort of, more or less. But it's to get to where I am in my practice 12 years later now, I know I could do it in half the time. Easy, knowing what I know now. But you know what? It's that's part of it. That's part of learning it, is you look at issues that happen and you say, man, what can we do about it? You come up with a solution, and then you got it going forward.
I think we all learn things from the School of Hard Knocks. And, we're at least fortunate, at least at this point in time, that there are a plethora of dental podcasts, or these dental Facebook groups, dental mastermind groups. I mean, guys, think about the dentists that did this 30, 40 years ago. They had none of this stuff. I mean, they literally were just flying by the seat of their pants, as far as that goes. So we do have that opportunity that we can, you guys can learn from my mistakes you can learn from Paul's mistakes, and you can do things even better. If we were able to accomplish what we've done, you can do even better than that, because now you have even more information than we had. So, I mean, there are so many of those little stupid things that could have made such a big difference as far as, how quickly you grow. I realized, so I use Flex communication software, and that's our text confirmations and patient text communication, all that stuff. I realized 6 months ago that there was a feature on there that had apparently been there for a while, where it sent out automatic text to patients that were overdue for their recall appointments. And
Yeah.
for like 2.5 years, I had no idea that this feature was there and it was just turned off. And all I had to do was go into another section of this dashboard, turn this on, and all of a sudden, all of our patients that are overdue for their recall start getting automated texts, to schedule their next appointment. And guess what? All of a sudden, our hygiene started filling up way faster because all these automated texts were going out. So, I mean, like, there are probably little opportunities like that that could have a huge impact on your practice once you figure them out. But like, you do need to take that time out of the chair, because part of the problem is, again, when I first started, I was much more full-time clinically seeing patients. So you're
Yeah.
trying to squeeze everything that you're trying to do with payroll and HR and marketing and, you name it, you're trying to squeeze it all in a couple days of the week. It's really tough to do that, especially if you want to grow quickly. And that's the benefit of bringing in associates. I know we had mentioned earlier, like at first you had a little bit of, fear paralysis as far as like, am I ready? Are they going to be good for my patient base? Are they going to take care of my patients? I've heard other dentists that have bad experiences. But guys, like if you find a good associate, I mean, it creates so much flexibility. It allows your practice to grow so much faster. It gives you the opportunity to really focus more on other things. And it's not just the associates, the whole leadership team. Paul had mentioned how at this point in time, his practice basically runs without him. I went to Italy with my wife a few weeks ago. Entire week, I brought my laptop. I told myself I wasn't gonna do a lot of. I didn't open my laptop one time the entire week I was gone. I didn't get any texts about any problems. Matt and I were talking about this before. I apparently we had to let an employee go in the offices. No one even told me about it. They figured it out. They handled it well. It was the right decision. I found out about it after the fact. Oh, by the way, we had to do this. I mean, that's huge, guys. If you can hire some great leaders, if you can empower them, if you can lean into them, it's going to create such a better environment for you, because it's like, let's face it, it's stressful owning a dental practice, especially if you own a growing, bigger dental practice or you own multiple dental practices. I mean, it feels like that shitstorm never ends. But if you've got some great leaders that you can surround yourself with that can handle, that you trust to handle things, and that's the other part of the equation too. Like, you have to actually trust them, and they have to feel that you trust them to make decisions. Otherwise, the buck's going to stop with you on everything. Everyone's going to come back to you with every single problem they ever have, and you're going to lose your mind. And I'm sure you went through a period that felt like that, Paul. I know I went through a period that felt like that. While we are busier than ever as we're preparing to add more, startups here, my life is actually less stressful now than it was a year ago, because I have now more great leaders in my organization that can handle some of these problems for me. So
Yeah, I could totally agree. I mean, and I can relate to your story is that, I mean, this should not make us feel good, but let me explain why it makes me feel good. Is I remember one time we had a front desk person, and I just like asked one day, I'm like, hey, what happened to that person? Because I was just thinking about him one day, and I'm like, oh, we fired her like 6 weeks ago. And I was just like, oh man. And that shouldn't make me feel good, but I'm saying what makes me feel good is that I didn't need to know about it. They took care of it. It was the right thing to do, and they took the initiative, and they started the hiring process again. They did all this. So I think you have to surround yourself. You've got to surround yourself with really good people, and you've got to pour into them. You've got to develop them. I had a leadership team at my practice long before I really got out of their way. And so it was great to have them. I thought I wasn't doing so much. And then when we shut down for COVID, I realized that, wow, I am really taking on a lot of responsibility still. And when I came back from that, that's when I kind of changed. And I said, hey, are you comfortable doing this? Yeah, I'm comfortable. Okay. Let me know if you need help. Okay. Okay. And then eventually got to the point like, hey, this is going on. Do you want to know about it? And I'm like, no, not really. Unless you need help. I got it all under control. No need to tell you. Perfect. And you just keep transferring that responsibility. And for me, this was a many year process of me realizing what they could take on and how much of the leadership and the coaching and the management of the practice I could really give to them. And you might not think that they're capable of doing it, but I assure you, they're better than you at it because they're there all the time and they're in the trenches.
100%.
And this is something that they love doing. And even like my most menial task, I used to have to do this expense report. Hated it, hated doing it. Never wanted to train somebody to do it because it was just so much easier just to do it. And I trained my assistant to do it. She loves it. She's like, this is awesome. It's like one of my favorite times of the month. And I'm like, really? I'm like, that was like the bane of my existence. Like that would be something I had to do for like 2 weeks. And they'd be calling me like, hey, we need to do the expense report. I need to do the expense report. And I'm just like, I don't want to do the expense report. I hate the expense report. And then I got rid of it and she loves it. So the stuff you don't like doing, someone else wants to do it on your team. I assure you. And man, what a beautiful place you can get yourself to as an owner if you can create that self-sustaining business that removes you as the bottleneck. And I know we're not talking about practice sales, but man, someone that wants to buy your practice would love to buy that practice. But I'm kind of thinking if you can get it to this level, you wouldn't want to sell it. You'd be like, this is too damn good. So, and I know that's what you're kind of going for too, Andrew, is like you're building and removing yourself out and scaling. And I think it's awesome.
Well, I think that, unfortunately, most dentists that own practices, like they don't truly own a business. Their business owns them. They are a glorified employee within their own business and they're wearing all these hats. But when you're able to build a leadership team around you, like that's when you can truly become like a real business owner that has, all the added support and things like that. And to your point too, if you're doing a million things, do you think you're going to do every single one of them extremely well? Or, if you, divide the workload and all of a sudden take a bunch of stuff off your plate, now you're going to be able to really focus on the super important big picture things that you need to focus on, like your team culture, like your patient experience, like the systems within your office. And your team members will be able to take on a lot of the other stuff that you probably didn't have to do. But I do think as dentists, like a lot of us are a little stubborn in that sense where we just think, no one's going to do it as well as me. And like maybe to some extent, maybe team members won't care as much as you because it's not really their business. But I will tell you, man, so many different things that I was scared to delegate, I have delegated and found out that the person doing it is doing as good or better than I had done, or at least they're doing almost as good as I was doing. And there's really no noticeable difference. So I think we build this fear in our minds that we can't give anything up. We can't give up any of the responsibilities. We have to be involved in every single decision. I used to, if we got a bad review, I used to personally reach out and call the patient and I'd get all worked up about it because it's my practice and my baby. And I'd probably take it too personally.
You used to get really worked up about it.
Yeah, I think I still do.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's some times where it feels like, people are being a little unreasonable. It is what but that's fine. I realized, why don't I remove myself from this? This isn't good for me. I wasn't having great results all the time, like trying to solve these issues. I offloaded it to my operations. He is amazing at, resolving these conflicts. And I don't even find out about them anymore. I don't even get notifications when reviews come in because now I don't even have to think about it. He does, and he deals with it. And he has a much higher success rate than I did as far as getting reviews either reversed to 5 stars or removed altogether, whatever else it is. So I just think that is a lesson that the sooner you learn it, the happier you're going to be as a business owner. So
totally. And I tell all my clients, I say, make a 3-column thing, make a column with the stuff you love doing, the stuff you're just kind of like whatever about, and then the stuff you absolutely hate doing. And if you can only do the stuff you love, you're going to do it so much better. If you want a surefire recipe for living a miserable life, give yourself too many responsibilities and try to complete every one of them in a hurry. And you will be pissed off all day. And I can tell you that from experience. If you're doing everything in a hurry because you got so many things to do, that is not a good way to live. So if you can get some things off your plate, even if it costs you money, man. I mean, how many people listening would say, man, I would pay somebody $100K a year if I never had to deal with anything that I hated dealing with ever again? I mean, you can do so much. I mean, I have somebody that comes to my house once a week for 4 hours. They return things to Amazon. They refill all our fridges and face all like the seltzer drink and the water bottles and stuff. And she does some laundry and stuff. And it's just like, I can do that. But you know what? I wouldn't. I'd be sitting there. I'd be upstairs in the master bedroom. I got to go all the way downstairs in the garage to get a bottle of water. And I'm just like, man, I need to get a fridge up here and just have somebody stock it. So I'm just like, that's a weird example, but you can find somebody to do anything that you fail to do because it's not enjoyable and you procrastinate.
Don't want to do it.
Well, I think some people kind of wear it like a badge of honor, like, oh, I'm working 100 hours a week. And they almost, no, you're right. But I do think that is a mentality of some dentists. I do think some dentists are just inherently kind of cheap and they don't want to spend money on things. But again, your time is valuable. You can only do so much. And, if you love clinical dentistry, then you should hire enough other people in your practice that are working on your business so that you can just be a full-time clinical dentist. If you don't love clinical dentistry, then you should hire associates to do the clinical dentistry so that you can do, bigger picture stuff. But like, again, you can't do everything. You've got to have some balance in life. So I think Paul brought up an absolutely great point. Figure out the things that you enjoy doing most within your business and keep doing those things and try to offload as much of all the other tasks as possible. I dragged my feet for like 2 years on hiring an executive assistant. I mean, every time I saw Mark Costa say, like, you hired an executive assistant, and it wasn't just him, it was other people in this mastermind group. Like, dude, like, what are you doing? You've got multiple practices. Like, you're working way too much. You need an executive. I don't need that. Like, I don't even know what they would do, that type of a thing. That was like the best decision I've made this year, was hiring an executive assistant. So
Yeah.
I think everyone needs to step back. You need to think about what you're doing, what you don't have to do, and try to either delegate it to people that are already within your organization, or hire somebody else like what Paul has, or like an executive assistant to come in and help you out. So Paul, like, what are you doing now when you're not doing clinical dentistry? I know you said that you're still working more than most of your friends and family realize. You've got your podcast. You had mentioned some coaching. What are you doing with your coaching program?
Yeah, so I have my podcast. We're doing coaching. We just launched a online like mastermind community group. So
Oh, awesome.
this just launched like 2 days ago. So I'm growing that. I'm pouring everything into that, just meeting people. It's been really cool. I mean, we're just into it, but it's just cool to like to interact. I want to meet more of my listeners. That's what I'm trying to do. So right now, what I've been trying to do with my coaching is the same thing I did with my practice, is learn the very best way to do it. And not the best way I'm saying like I want clients, I want money. I'm talking about, I'm like following a lot of stuff with like therapy and life coaching. Like, how can I be more effective as a coach to help people to make differences in their lives? Because you get to this point, and I did my practice sale. I'm good in every regard. And through the practice sale, you kind of have a crisis a little bit too, because you hit your number and you get there and you go, oh, gosh, like I thought this was going to do something magically for me. And that's one of my regrets in my practice life, is I was chasing a number. I wish I would have been chasing fulfillment a little bit more.
Yeah.
But I found what I really enjoy is that I love creating things, and I love seeing other people succeed and helping people. And I get to live vicariously through my clients. So that's pretty much what I'm up to. And do I work 60 hours a week? Hell no, I don't. But I'm working enough. You know, I will tell everybody I don't get out of bed till about 11 o'clock every single day. School's starting next week, and that's going to be a tough one because the schools won't let me bring my kids at 11 a.m. So I have to get up. But you know, I was reading this. I want to bring this up because I think people will think this is interesting. I was trying to find like, what is the amount of hours of work for happiness? Because there's studies that show like if you don't do paid work, it hurts your happiness. And kind of like how like I think the number for like income was like, it's probably like 120K right now. Like after 120K, there's no more happiness past that. So the bare minimum, like the happiest spot, is at 8 hours a week. That's it.
Wow.
8 hours a
Really?
week. And then all the way up to like, it was like, I was reading, it was like all the way up to like 30. There's no difference. And then past 30, it starts dipping. So there is a big argument I think you could make that could say, man, I mean, dentists know like 5 days a week's a lot. I mean, 4 days a week seems about right, but 3 is even better. And once you get down to 3, well, the next logical step, just, you know where it's going. It just keeps going down. But then you find things to fill your schedule with that you enjoy doing, which that's where I'm at right now. And I do like that. So I'm happy, and I'm thankful that I've went through this whole process. I've learned a lot of lessons, but I wouldn't be where I am now if I didn't go through all that. So I'm thankful for that.
It's funny, the little things you don't think about though too. Cause I mean, you know, I used to work 5.5 days a week clinically, and then it was 5 as an associate, you know, then it was 4, but just like, I mean, stupid stuff. Like I'm big on like intermittent fasting. And so like when I'm at the office seeing patients, I don't ever eat during the day. Like I'll have my
Yeah.
coffee. I might have a sugar-free Monster for lunch. And that's about it. Now I work from home most days of the week. It's a little bit, I find it more challenging when I'm sitting in my home office to do my intermittent fasting and not eat all day. Cause you kind of like wander through the kitchen, see what everyone else is up to. And you're like, oh yeah, you know, like maybe I'll have a snack or maybe I'll eat something. So it does feel a little bit weird sometimes, even though I'm still working probably as many hours, if not more, than when I was full-time clinical as an associate. It's a different type of work, and you get a different type of feeling from it and things like that too. So I do think that there's some fulfillment in actually like physically going to the office, even that one day a week.
Yes.
So I think about that sometimes too, because, you know, as we keep growing, at some point it's possible that I cut out that day completely. And sometimes I wonder if I'm going to be happy, like never going in. And I've had thoughts about maybe I want to actually create, like, have an office space outside of my home. So at least I feel like I'm getting in the car and I'm going somewhere and I'm doing something productive versus, I sit at home all week, just working on my laptop. So,
So
um,
true.
yeah,
We're building a house right now, and above the garage, I'm building my new office space, and it's not going to be accessible from the house.
Oh, so I was thinking the same thing. Super
Yeah.
smart.
I don't want it to be accessible. I don't want to be interrupted when I'm in there. I want to I want to be leaving like separate. But same thing, man. But what's great about like what you mentioned there is like if you cut yourself out clinically, how hard is it just to reinsert yourself back in?
it's
You've got
true.
complete flexibility and freedom to do so, and I think that's what everyone wants. I think that's what everyone should shoot for in practice ownership is just to practice without limitations. You can practice the way you want, completely unlimited. You want to do crown on 19? That's the only procedure you do. You could set it up. I mean, that's a little far fetched, but you know what I mean. You can do whatever you want, and you can take it away and you can put it back in because it's not dependent on you anymore. It's more about what's fulfilling to you, and I think that's what we should all shoot for.
Well, and when Mark stopped doing clinical dentistry, Mark Costas, he started doing more volunteering, and it's like that's what fulfills him, and that's what's kind of cool. It's like if you get to that point where you no longer have to do clinical dentistry, you can still do it, and you can do it in a very meaningful way where you're giving back to people who otherwise couldn't do it. So I mean, that's one of his big projects right now is they're trying to build actual dental structures in different third world countries that have no access to dental care and then get a group
Yeah,
of
it's
people to
cool.
go to these different areas. So
That's
like
really
that,
cool.
that is really cool. And I think, he always talks about his story of, he was chasing that number. He wanted to hit, $1 million earned, 1 million in the bank account. And that was always a life goal of his. And he got there and realized it was like the most miserable he'd ever been. So I
Hmm.
think, you made a good point there too, is like, we all think that hitting that next milestone, whether it's, financial or just achievement or whatever, that it's going to change our perspective, but it's really not, guys. Like you have to find a way to enjoy the journey and not just, chase some end goals, because you're going to be very empty once you eventually get there and realize that it's not all that's cracked up to be. So
Part of it is, all three of us are successful in our own fields. I think we're all pretty close, and it's I think people who aren't and they're aspiring to be, the number is like the easy thing to focus on. It's like that's like a target, like, oh, that's the easy thing, right? I think what's scary is humans can become accustomed to misery along the way, and they start to say, well, this is the way it's supposed to be, so that's the way
Hmm.
it is, right? I think the real thing is like their definition of success is really skewed. So a lot of people, because of social media in today's world, the definition of success is Italian sports cars and bank accounts. The definition I use is doing what I want to do every day, every minute on my own terms, right? And that's coming from
Yeah.
like, cancer survivor, amputee, 2 near-death experiences in the military. I know tomorrow could be the last day. I've physically faced it, like physically found out I had bone cancer. Super scary. I had my leg cut off. Before that, 2 really bad parachute accidents in the middle of the night. And the reality is like I just hit a milestone recently. Me and Andrew privately talked about it. I just hit a milestone. It was a pretty big deal for me. And you hit it and you're expecting like fireworks or like a parade, or you're expecting like something internally that's going to be really awesome, and it just clicks off like a
Yeah.
it's like your car hitting 100,000 miles. It just rolls over,
yeah.
and you're like, is there a show that happens or a light that goes off? It just rolls over, and you're like, what just happened? You hit it, but is there more? Nope, that's it. The number rolled over. That's all you got, and that is the most unfulfilling thing on the planet. What should happen is that you should know that that goal ends up being the thing to enable that freedom to do what you want to do every day on your terms, whether it's
Mhm.
finger paint or volunteer or play hopscotch, whatever it is. That should enable it.
Yeah, I totally agree, man. And I think the thing is that we're all looking outside of ourselves for fulfillment and happiness, like that we
Oh,
need
100%.
that something needs to be done, that you need to do something. And I can tell you, you've got everything you need right now, because there is nothing to be done. There is no box to check. I think we can make it better. I think we can improve our lives to some extent, but that deep down, deep in your core, happiness, that does not come from things or a number or any level of security. I think that's just the way we're wired as humans. We find the fault. We have that negativity bias. And we say, oh man, I don't feel good. Why don't I feel good? Oh, it's because of this. Well, if I had this, I'd feel good. Okay. And then, like you mentioned, man, it's that 100,000 miles. You think you're like, man, here it comes. Whew. And there it goes.
Well, and then we keep moving the goalposts, and then we're looking at the next goal. And so, yeah, I mean, I just think it's human nature, but you've got to stop and kind of reset, take a minute, do some meditation, do some gratitude journaling, do some reflection, whatever it is that kind of gets you there. Because otherwise, we're just going to always be chasing that next goal. But I mean, we got deep on this episode, Paul. This
Yeah,
was this
this
was
is long.
this was some great
fun.
stuff. I enjoyed it. Thanks for making time on your Friday to come out and talk to us. And again, I think from talking to you, I even realize that much more all of the great pearls I've stolen from you over the years. Because as you're talking, I'm like, oh yeah, like that stuff we're doing. I bet I got that from Paul like 5 years ago. So thank
I
you
got
again
it from somebody
for,
else.
Yeah, well, right. Why reinvent the wheel? So
Yeah.
you've got this great coaching program. If anyone's interested in checking it out, where can they find that at?
Yeah, they can go to dentalpracticeheroes.com, and I have a free webinar on there that explains a little bit about that scheduling stuff that we went through today. And then it's also kind of my philosophy of just 3 days a week of dentistry, making 7 figures a year. That's what I want for dentists. So they can go to the website, dentalpracticeheroes.com, and see everything that I offer. So thanks.
And you've got a couple books too. I know you've got 2 of the Dental Practice Hero books. Are you working on any more books right now, or?
I don't think so. I think
Okay.
I'm gonna. Maybe one day, but I don't think it's gonna be a dental book. I think it's gonna be more of a mainstream book on more like kind of like consciousness, philosophical stuff that I might take more interest in. But you know what, dude, I'm having fun with what I'm doing with the coaching right now. So like for this stage in my life, this is where I'm at. Who knows, man? We want to plan out 5 years ahead. I don't know what I'm going to be doing a year from now. It could change, but that's the way I like it. I like it to keep it real and keep it exciting.
Yeah, Paul, it was great having you on, man.
Thank you.
We met at Dental Nachos, I think, in Philadelphia recently, and then I
Yes.
followed you on social media too. And there's certain people we've wanted to have on the show. We had Mark Costas, and now you. You guys are kind of the guys that me and Andrew want to get to that level with, and having you guys on is awesome. Now, obviously, you inspired Andrew, and it's really an honor to have you on the show. Thank you for the listeners who all came and joined us today. And hey, listeners, please share, like, subscribe. Do all the normal, leave reviews. We don't do sponsors. This is all purely unbiased. We bring on personalities and people and companies that me and Andrew believe in, that we've used ourselves, that we've been successful with, or that have influenced us some way in a positive way, like Paul has for Andrew. So please, guys, like, subscribe, and leave a review and share. Thank you so much, and have a great day.